TV host. She hosts some stuff, and her voice is kind of up here, and she says, I want to have a deeper, huskier voice. I said, well, practice yawning, fake yawning, and then start doing words in that so your voice drops like this, and you'll have a much huskier round voice. Do you remember when Madonna first came out, and she was singing like this, I gotta dress you up in my lap. And then all of a sudden she did like Live to Tell. When you live to tell. She learned vocal technique. She took training and said, I'm losing my voice all the time doing these shows. I need to learn how to preserve my voice. And that's the technique that they taught her. So that's a good little voice.
Well, as you can see, Wally is a great singer. I know him as a singer and a musician. And he's expanded everything that he does.
How many people have heard Wally's Adam West?
3. Oh, that's good.
Well, I'll re-record it and steal it from you. How's that? That's what Bobby Fuller did on our iPod. Wow, when we were doing the Batman show in 65, 66, he approached me here. He was from Texas where we came from. He says, could I steal your song? I said, I didn't write it. I got it from Buddy Holly when I was on tour with him. I took him off his album. And he said, I'm going to re-record your song. I said, it'll never sell. We already had a hit on it in the 50s.
Who was that?
Bobby Fuller.
Oh, Bobby Fuller.
Bobby Fuller 4. Yeah. Way before you guys' times. Who remembers Bobby Fuller? They found him in the car dead, right? Remember that? Right here in L.A. I'm an old guy.
Now, did you write this song?
No, I never wrote the song. When I was touring with Buddy Holly back then, 2 nights was a tour. I was with him 3 days before he got killed. And I'd asked him, could I record one of your songs? He said, go ahead, but it'll never be a hit. It's an obscure cut on one of his albums. We had hit him.
Number 1 in the tri-state area?
It was the number 1, yeah, a little bit further, maybe 4 states. But it sold a lot. It did really well, yeah.
Great, we were the first to make it a number 1.
Yeah, it was a great song.
All right.
Wally, that guy right there is off to go fight the law now with his mask on. Just remember the law won.
We know where you're going, and we know.
Hey, Wally, you talked about yawning. For some aspiring voice actors in the crowd, you tell them about puking?
Oh, yeah. Puking is also another good technique. If you want to do one of those fake 70s radio DJs, hey, everybody, a little, because it sounds like it's a term called puking. It sounds like the guy is trying to puke something up. And it was when I was in radio when I was 16, I talked like that because I thought it was cool. And then I moved to a bigger city, and they said, no, you're a puker, don't do that. So, like a puker, what are you talking about? So there's usually a term for every type of voice technique that you can think of. There's, round, or there's puking, or there's this, or nasal, or there's, the mask, and all that kind of stuff. So it's if you can make a certain sound, there's probably a term for it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I've seen it so many times.
Well, what's really great is a lot of people, you can also talk without a voice. Or you're just basically pushing air over your vocal cords and there's not much voice at all. And that makes for sometimes good characters as well. Especially if you let your face kind of sag or you're doing it, it sounds really sad and wimpy. Oh, hello. And I think that's what Jim Cummings does when he does Winnie the Pooh, is there's very little voice. It's like, oh, mother, it's all up here, it's all up. So it's just knowing your instrument, knowing where things come, and driving around towns, being stuck in traffic, and just basically talking to yourself and experimenting with stuff, and you'll find all these different, voices that you can. We used to do a thing on the Tonight Show called a video metaphor, and they wanted kind of a guy that sounds like this, like he was teaching a class and he was really boring, or one of those guys who narrates the old nature films that you'd see in school, And now another video metaphor. Today we see where the guy just cannot read. And they say, Johnny will back this up, that it takes a good singer to be a bad singer. If you have to do a thing where you have to sound like a bad singer, you have to be a really good singer to be able to do that. Because you're so well trained in your technique, as you naturally want to do things with a vibrato and different phrasings. You have to unlearn that to be a bad singer, where you have to kind of be a good actor to be a bad actor as well, which is, going back to the Batman thing, which is the genius of Adam West. He was so good at being a bad actor, because that was the character that he was doing, that people thought he really was a bad actor, and he's not. What he was doing was an imitation of the old movie serial Batman, who was a bad actor, and he was doing that wooden thing where he... I think that, back in the movie serial days, the guy probably didn't really know his script that well because these things were shot in an afternoon. So Adam figured out a good way to modify his phrasing where it like he didn't know what he was going to say
According
next.
to Bert Ward, he was trying to get more screen time by speaking really slowly. I don't know.
But I learned,
I know.
I learned this morning in the studio with you that you know your scripts. He probably, I don't know if I should talk about this, but he gets these jobs where he reads a script, and if the script isn't right with words, he says, I'm not doing it.
Well, it's not, it doesn't, I'm not that callous. I like money like anybody else. But sometimes you get a script in and there are misspellings and grammatical errors and you just get a real amateur hour kind of feeling. And you're like, danger, Will Robinson, danger. It's in my experience, it's been where if a script comes in like that, chances are the people on the producer end are not people you're probably going to want to work with anyway, because, as the Riddler would say, I'm so much smarter than you. But some of these people from these other outlying areas that aren't really privy, I don't know, have people not figured out, like, spell check yet? You get scripts and then so I look at it and I'm reading it over. And I did too, yeah. And they say, what was is passed down through generations no, it was passed crown through generation. Passed crown? Did you not even pre-read this? Did you not check your work? So I'm like, because chances are you'll read it and you'll get the job and then you'll have to go in and work with these people and it'll be just frustrating. There'll be 30 people with an all different opinion and you'll be like, why did I even audition for this? So you develop an instinct for that as well as you grow in your career to look at stuff and go, you have to be able to say no as well as yes. It's nice to want to work a lot and accept a lot of different stuff, but don't accept everything. You have to kind of develop that instinct for like, I'm probably going to pass on this one. Early on, I decided I was going to pass on anything that had anything to do with alcoholic endorsements or gambling or lottery or casinos or any looping that has profanity in it. I auditioned for Good Will Hunting as an ADR guy where they wanted some guys to say really vile things to this woman on the street corner. And I mean, sure, it's acting and you're doing a character, but it's still coming out of my mouth. And it's still my voice being used to say that stuff. And they stepped up things like, hey, baby, I got something good for you. Come here. Like, oh, no, you got to go really vile. Stay, talk about it. I'm like, nah, you got the wrong guy. But thank you. I'll see you later. And my agents quickly gained an understanding of stuff that I was comfortable with and not comfortable with. Like a lot of swearing I call kind of verbal nudity, where in on-camera Screen Actors Guild you have to disclose before the audition that there's nudity required. So you'll see a breakdown. It'll say, the role of a 26-year-old girl who's a musician but struggling, she's a waitress, nudity required. So the girl can say, I don't do nudity, I'm gonna pass on this one. So it's just a personal preference of mine that I choose not to kind of do that stuff, and it seems to work out all right.
So if they say in a voice actor casting call nudity required, should they be skeptical?
Well, I choose to do all my sessions in the nude because you can in voiceover, so it's actually in my contract. But I won't swear. I'll do something to make you start naked, but I will not swear.
Well, I see what you're start naked.
Yes,
Starks?
Yes.
Got a question?
Stark's naked.
Starks naked! You've been to Wally's house, right?
I sure have.
Let me ask you this.
But he was fully dressed, just in full disclosure.
Let me ask you this. Based on the temperature at which he keeps his house, would you say every read at Wally's house is a cold read?
Yes, I would, as a matter of fact. Yes.
What in the world is a cold read, Wally? And is there something similar in the music business? Johnny Green, go, Wally.
Cold read is where you don't get to look at the script first. You're reading it. Anybody been to San Diego Comic-Con? See the voice actor panel? They give the scripts out and you're on the fly. And you kind of have to develop that. Luckily in radio I was able to develop that skill as a cold reader because I was too lazy to prep my newscasts. So I just ripped something off the thing and I read it and pray to God that it works out all right.
So laziness paid off for you.
Laziness paid off, it did, so you just never know. But that's what cold read is.
Is there anything musically that would be similar to a cold read?
When you auditioned for Batman, it was pretty much, there was a lot of people trying to get on Batman at that time. Everybody wanted to, so they had to do the window thing to accommodate all the big stars that wanted to, be bad at Batman, be Batman villains. And yet Johnny, relatively unknown at that time, was able to get out and show, and he did it.
I was
It
very,
impromptu.
I was very fortunate.
He was in the office, and I said, well, can you guys act? What can you do? And,
Well, I just didn't get into that office. I had to go through a lot.
yeah, but it was a cold read. It was impromptu.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's I've written in the books with Batman stuff, but basically, to make a long story short, I was reading the trades, and I was in New York playing at the New York World's Fair, 1964, and just hit Life magazine with Marilyn Monroe, and all of us had green hair, and I started the green hair in 1959, and it was a challenge to me. Of course, there was a movie I found later in life, Dean Stockwell had the boy with the green hair, and it was a black and white movie, and for about 3 minutes in the film, they were in color because he had green hair. And I didn't know that, I didn't copy that, but I registered it to or more musical group with green hair. I could sue them as not a copyright or registration. But long story short, the Joker was supposed to have orange hair. Did you know that? Yeah, well, I was there, and a lot of books, they don't write about this. I was there with Charlie B. Fitzsimons, I love him dearly, and Bill Dozier. And when I approached them, I sent them a film, a silent film, if you will, in color, of the Greenmen doing choreography like that, doing crazy things, eating fire. They would never let the fire go on the Batman show because the kids would go out and learn how to eat fire and blow up. So that my head was cut as far as eating fire. So when I sent them the film, they sent back. At the time I went from New York to Dallas, Texas, and I sent them this film. The film beat me to LA. What happened, the letter said from 20th Century Fox, Greenmen Productions, at this time we're not interested in your act, but if you're in LA, we'll look at you. What that meant to me is I told the band, we're going to be on Batman, that new show. What show? You know, the trades are writing about it. So when I went down to the studio, we went to the gate, green hair, and they said, we don't have you on the list here. I said, well, you better call somebody because we're going to be on Batman. And they called Charlie B. Fitzsimons and said, let him in. So we got through the gate, and they brought all the writers out, and they looked at us. They were all hippies with long hair and beards and stuff. And they looked at us, and we looked at them, and they said, what do you do? And I said, we're singers and we're musicians. And they said, can you act? Here's a script, read it, look at the film, and Billy May knew the music. And I said, why would you have the Joker with orange hair like Ronald McDonald when you can have the Greenmen? 24 hours later, we were signed. We went from eating no food to buying towels. and the cast, like Adam West and Robin, and all the people involved were sweetheart people trying to make a living and eat too, you know. And it was just a lot of fun. Back then, it was segregated. I don't know if they're still doing that on the sets. You had the stars, and then you had the extras. And then they had the fence, so we would eat the great food, and they would eat the extra food. Those were the good old days. We had stars on the dressing room, and it was just a lot of fun. And we're still doing it. Adam and I and you, we talk about this. One time we were on tour. You were with us on this one. Frank Worship. I knew him before he was, he was a comedian. And he said to me, he said, Johnny, he says, can you imagine Batman and Gorsham? In other words, get rid of Robin, on a tour. He was a great guy, wasn't he?
He was awesome. He was terrific. He came over to my house one night and we were watching a Batman episode. And he was older at this point and he had a girlfriend. But when he was the Riddler, he was bouncing around doing all this stuff. And his girlfriend couldn't believe that he could move like that because he just couldn't move like that. He was just, honey, you look like a bug. And there's one time when the Riddler went into like a manhole cover and he brought the lid up and had him underlit and he like looked around like that. I said, Frank, were you actually in like a sewer with a manhole? He goes, I don't remember. He couldn't remember.
Well, in the early 60s, I was working in Las Vegas, working in the showrooms. We were at the Latin at the time, and we were working with Conway Twitty on a tour. And I told the band, I says, Frank Gorsham's working in town. And who's that? I said, he's a comedian. He's really good. And he'll come in here and crash our party. And sure he will. Sure he will. And I told Tommy, I says, Gorsham? He said, I know him. I says, he'll be there. He's my friend. You watch, Be like you coming on the stage and say, can I sing a song? I said, let's go, rock and roll. So sure enough, he walks through the door of the Aladdin. walks right on the stage, don't even know announcement, takes the mic, hey Johnny, how you doing? Start telling dirty jokes.
Yeah.
He was a great guy.
Frank was a frustrated musician too. He wanted to be a singer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. He was a great, we worked with, Wally and I worked with a lot of great people.
Yeah.
Now we're getting old.
Yeah.
But I'm older than you.
Excuse me, we?
Hey, as we're talking, if anyone would like to participate in our American Voice Idol Challenge, head on up to the mic. Do you have a question?
Look, your lady has a question.
Grab that mic over there so we can
Get to the
hear.
mic there for us.
Now, Wally and I are old.
Yeah, I have a question about training as a voice actor, and also it's like a two-parter. So, I'm just interested in your background. I know you did some radio from what I'm hearing, but if you took any like classes and such, and if you had any recommendations for that. And also, I noticed as an animation lover, I know some of the voice actors are actual animators themselves, who I presume don't have much training. So I was wondering, what is your thought on that? Like, and they do, from what I hear, a pretty good job as animators with probably no training. So I just want to know your thoughts on that as well as your training background.
Well, part one, my training. Yes, I took a class with a guy named Wally Wingert back in the early 90s. It's good. Wally Wingert directed a lot of the old G.I. Joe cartoons, Transformers, all those old shows. He's one of the greats. But the thing that you have to be good at when you go into training is, first of all, you have to be a good actor. Because it's really, voice acting really is all about acting. Once you have developed your talents as an actor, then you can go into a voice acting class and learn how to hone those skills in the parameters of being just using your voice as an actor. Because on camera, have you done on camera acting at all? Yeah. On camera, as you well know, you can just throw a glance at somebody and not even say something vocally, and it will convey a feeling or an emotion. Like just, an eyebrow, like, or like that. You can't do that in voiceover. You have to do that with your voice. And sometimes it's staggering your breathing or doing something that still will convey that feeling of maybe nervousness, but you don't have the facial ability to convey it that way. So sometimes if you're really nervous and you're trying to tell somebody something, you can stutter or take a breath or, see that's all those little vocalisms that you can throw in that even though you don't see your face, you still understand just by listening what the feeling is that's going to be conveyed. So once your acting skills are solid, then you can go into like a voice acting class. There's many of them out there. And then learn how to take your acting skills and direct it into the area of voice acting, which is very rewarding. It's a lot of fun. Did I answer all your questions?
Yes, the first part, and the second part is animators.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting because not everybody's a Seth MacFarlane. He happens to be a brilliant animator and a brilliant actor. And sometimes animators will, because they're doing their pitch films on a low budget, they'll just end up voicing it themselves because they work for themselves for free. So when they submit the clip to like Cartoon Network or whatever, they say, oh yeah, we like that, and we'll just keep that voice because that's the character. Because when they animate the character, they know the character so well, how the character moves, how he looks, how he behaves, and they've given him that personality with their voice. And then they hear other voice actors come in, they're like, no, that's not really right yet. Here's how it's done. And then they just end up doing it themselves because they have created that character, they just know it so well. Seth MacFarlane is like a great example of that. Trey and Matt from South Park, they do those characters because they created them, they know how they go. Seth started hiring a lot of writers on Family Guy for a lot of the voices, and they weren't trained voice actors, but because the writers had written those characters and essentially created them, Seth felt that, well, they know how they're going to sound better than a voice actor that comes into audition. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that because they're not trained, but that's Seth's show and he can do what he wants to with it. That's why a lot of the voices in Family Guy season 4, 5, 6, and on started all sounding the same because they weren't trained voice actors, but they were writers who knew those characters. But not everybody's a Seth MacFarlane. I mean, he's the exception to the rule. He's absolutely brilliant, but that does happen. Well, the animator who works a lot doing not only animating the character, but also the voices, Tony Anselmo, who does Donald Duck. So that was just one of the instances where, hey, the animator is doing the animation, and he probably, I would guess, I don't know this for sure, as he's animating, probably will go, to get those things to figure out how, and he just ends up being so intimate with the character that he ends up doing the voice and the animation. So, but that's a very rare case.
All right, panel, now let's critique her voice. What did you think?
I thought it's beautiful. What are you doing there? Do you have radio experience?
No, I'm improv.
Oh, good. That helps too. Improv is very good for all of that, because sometimes you go, Frank Welker. You know Frank Welker?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Greatest living voice actor. He does these amazing improvs during the Garfield show, many of them which make it into the show. And even though the scripts are really funny, written by Mark Evanier and all these other really talented script writers, Welker will do stuff that, as Garfield, that's just off the charts funny, and they'll leave it in. And that will happen, and sometimes it'll say in the breakdown, here's the script for this commercial, but we want actors who can improv on the fly. And you have to be able to go in there and come up with all these different ideas. There was an audition I did the other day. It was between this guy and a lawyer. And the lawyer was very stern, and the guy was like, yeah, okay, we're having this sale, and our lawyer says this is it. And at the end, I just threw in, it's like, counselor, your zipper's down, I can see your legal briefs. And it's just stuff like that you throw in, and sometimes that, because they get an audition in, probably 150 auditions, all of these guys reading the same thing, the same words, but you hear one guy throwing an ad-lib and change stuff, it's like, oh, that's kind of different, I never thought of that. I've actually been paid for ad-libs that I've thrown into auditions. They didn't cast me for the actual commercial, but they kept my improv in the script for the other actor, and they said, well, we're going to give you $100 because we used your improv. So I'm like, well, thanks for that. So you just never know, improv is also American training.
Alluring lady in red, come up to the microphone and ask your question.
Hello, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
I'm sorry.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to all of you guys. I'm Linda from Bob's Burgers. Yeah.
We're starving.
Bob's right there.
Oh, I see.
So my question was, I've done some acting and I've been in plays, and I went through a voiceover school after I had done acting. And I have a voice demo as well. But I did that a little bit over a year ago. And I was wondering how long is typical before you want to redo your voice demo?
You had to do that, Wally?
Yes, I just did it actually for 2014. I hadn't redone mine in several years because I was just so incredibly busy. But the Tonight Show was ending, and I wanted to send out this big package of stuff to kind of reintroduce myself to the casting people that I didn't have time to do stuff for during the 4.5 years I was on Tonight Show because of my schedule. So I said, I can't send out the same old demos that I've had since 2006. So it's a lot of work. Now, the stuff that you put on your demo, is it canned stuff that you created for the demo, or is it actually stuff that you've done that you, like actual shows and stuff?
No, it was like camp.
Okay,
It was with the school, but it was professionally made, and, so it sounds great, but it's not work that I've actually done. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, when you get to the point where it's actually work that you've done, you've got to go, YouTube is a great resource for that. But you have to go through DVDs and sometimes old VHSs, and you have to pull these clips that you want, and you have to compile them. It's a lot of work. But if you're canning a demo and you're just new, you're either your coach, or if you have an agent, they'll be an unbelievable resource for what to put on, where to put it, in what order, and what to leave off, and what to improve upon. So a lot of that is curious. So if you get an agent or get agent interest, then they'll say, well, we like your demo, but before we send it out to casting people, we want this changed. And then you hire an engineer and change it. If you do a mail out and don't get any response, then wait a while and retool it, and then do another mail out in like another year or whatever.
Okay, so like once I get more work and I can actually prepare a different demo that'd be different from what I originally started with, that's when you recommend making a new one.
What do you feel your strengths are? Commercial, animation?
I would say definitely commercial. Yeah, commercial and animation. Animation is my favorite.
Okay.
Most fun, definitely.
So, have you created any of your own original characters?
Just in my head. I actually have a book that has little excerpts
Do just one accent for me, like do,
Uh,
who do you feel your strongest character is?
Oh, my strongest character. I haven't done it in a while. I had 2 jobs for a while, so I kind of put it on the back burner. Let's see.
No pressure.
Seriously.
No, that's why we're here. And this is a good,
Okay.
this is a good opportunity because people will say, okay, what do you got? And then if you go in prepared with a character and they go, okay, that's not really, what else you got? Throw me something out of the left field. You got to be ready to deliver.
Got it. Hey y'all, my name is Betty Booth. So nice to meet y'all. I'm so happy y'all came to my house. Here I got some cakes and I got some candy over here for the kids for Halloween. I'm gonna be Betty Booth for Halloween. Do you like it? Actually, I'm not. I'm actually Linda from Bob's Burgers. Has anyone here heard of Bob's Burgers? No? Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm turned on. That's,
Thanks.
so that's good. Yeah, way to go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
My name's Carla, and I am actually a professional massage therapist. I used to do acting about 20 years ago.
Can you do a massage in that voice?
Hi y'all, how you doing? No happy endings, thank you very much.
One of the classes that I'm actually really proficient in is actually myofascial release. And one of the discussions we had was for voice actors. Have you ever had any kind of therapy done on your throats for any type of injuries? Because there is actually a very specialized massage for working with vocal cords.
I just swallow gasoline. That kills it.
I use gas, real gas.
Yeah, if you're doing 7 nights a week and doing 3-hour shows a night, how'd you do it?
I don't know, man, those are the union days, you know. Now we're doing 3 and 4 nights a week because, as you know, music is down here. It's like getting a movie.
Well, I had a really bad cold back in 2009, and I developed nodules. So you had to be scoped, which is not nice. You go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and you know it's your bread and butter, it's your instrument, so you got to take real good care of it. And they put this thing down. If you got a gag reflex, it's ugly. But yeah, so I haven't had any type of therapy like that you're talking about, which I'd be open to that. But I've had the ear, nose, and throat doctor, like, you know, with the rotor down your nose, and the camera looking around at the light.
If you ever need to, there's 2 different variations. There's lymphatic drainage, which works on the lymph nodes. I discovered that one because I actually have throat cancer, and I have thyroid cancer, and I actually had most of my lymph nodes removed out of my neck, and so my vocal cords were actually paralyzed for about 6 months.
That's
So,
my nightmare.
for me it was as well. My face was paralyzed and my vocal cords were paralyzed.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to keep that in. I didn't know that existed. Thank you for that. Yeah, thanks.
All right, well, time has really gotten away from us. It's been a fantastic panel. Is there anything you guys would like to tell aspiring voice actors to sum up some things they should do or otherwise, how to pursue and have a long career in the business?
Yeah, don't smoke,
Don't smoke.
don't drink.
Don't drink.
People always say, are you an ex-alcoholic? I say, do I look like it? And I give them all Jimi Hendrix, all good friends of mine, and he did all of the things above.
And West, ask Johnny, how do you look so young? And West asked,
How you
look so young?
I-
I don't drink, I don't smoke.
I eat a lot of ice cream.
Sounds like universal safety precautions in this business.
Actually, Wally can answer that better because this man does a lot of voices, gets up early in the morning, does his own productions with his studio, and still has a good life.
It's all true except the getting up early in the morning part.
All right, well, let's say thank you to Mark Starks, Johnny G, and Wally Wingert.
I'm Mark Fullerton. Yay! Let's eat.
no, yeah.
everyone for joining us. Can you please use the back door?